Hello, I'm Dave Feinlieb, and this is Beyond the Shelf. This show is an open exploration of the people and process behind e-commerce. Through conversations with innovators in the space, we learn the stories of these leaders and their strategies for e-commerce success. You can find out more about how we're helping leading brands and retailers build retail media and product detail page content faster than ever before at itsrapid.ai. My guest on today's show is Matt Gehring, CMO at Dutch Pet. Matt has extensive experience in the field, having held roles as the GM of e-commerce at Everlane, SVP of growth marketing at Rothy's, and growth advisor at Hims. We're excited to dive into Matt's past experience and journey into e-commerce. Please enjoy my conversation with Matt Gehring. Matt, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
Take us back, would you? How did you get into the space?
I kind of just fell into it like 20 years ago. I had a friend that was working for a digital music startup, asked if, I wanted to join. I joined the marketing team and just kind of started doing a mix of analytics and site optimization and testing and consumer insights. And then from there, it just kind of, developed into running paid search and affiliates. And, you kind of, as my career grew, added more channels and retention and elements to kind of running the whole marketing gamut.
You make it sound so easy, but I'm guessing there were a few steps in there. It sounds like you've started out pretty hands-on with some of the tactics and so on in the early days of e-com.
Definitely. And then always sort of being in startups, I feel like that's never really gone away. So
100%. Tell us about Dutch. What's the company and what are you doing there?
So we're a pet telemedicine company. It sort of came out of COVID. So I guess you could say it's one of the benefits is that the rules and regulations had to open up so that you could actually do a vet visit virtually. But Joe, who I had worked with at Hims, left Hims to found Dutch, saw the market need. And so we're essentially providing access to vet care for customers across the US. And for most of the states, we're able to prescribe and treat. And it's been just a great thing. It's like a new category that kind of didn't exist. So that always adds fun challenges and kind of excitement to the work.
That's awesome. Now, you've worked at some really neat companies, Hims, Rothy's, Everlane. Tell us a little about maybe your experience there and then how that's similar and different compares with what you're doing now.
It's interesting because it's like three companies kind of all for the most part in the sort of D2C e-commerce space, but kind of at different stages. And, Hims, when I went there, it was essentially to help them launch. It was like really helping build out the channel structure, cohort model, where to get in front of this target customer they had, and sort of similar to Dutch, dealing with like state by state regulation. But it was really like, where could we break through scale and just go, go, go? Rothy's had been around for a few years, kind of in that low 8-figure revenue range, but weren't sure how to get to that next level, get to 100 million, 200 million plus. So that was really about building the team out. There was no team when I joined. It was one person. So it was really figuring out where to start and building out, an analytics team, a site kind of product team, retention, growth. And then Everlane was, more established. I feel like it's one of the original sort of D2C brands, been around for a while. And I think that one was a opportunity to kind of really figure out like, how do they find new areas of scale? How do they kind of retain and rekindle some of their relevance? Such a great brand, great product. And so that one was a little bit more like, how do we kind of shuffle and rework the team and figure out how to evolve?
These are such great companies that you worked with. A lot of our listeners are in roles where they're working, let's say, at a brand with a big retailer, or they're at a retailer. Will you take a minute and talk about some of the dynamics of D2C, just D2C 101 for those who maybe operate through more of a channel structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing that I like the most is the data. I mean, that was probably why I got into e-commerce in 99, 2000 and never left, because of all of the information you can get. I don't have to worry about measuring physical retail store and all of that detail, but it's really, to me, it's about directly connecting with that customer, being able to find them in whatever is the most relevant place. And I think that's the thing, even looking at Hims, Rothy's, Everlane, Dutch, it's potentially all the same channels, but you're using them in different ways, or some of them you're not even using at all because that customer isn't there. So I think the hard part is you have a virtual store, so you have to figure out how to get people there. There's not like a drive-by, like, oh, I got to go check that out. And you've got so much more data up front, and that connection and being able to tie everything together. I think it can make some things easier. At the same time, it's like you can kind of have analysis paralysis and just have too much information. So there's always that balance of, a brand new company like Dutch, of making decisions with very little data and kind of going off of more rough insights and like past experience versus, brands like Everlane that's got a decade of data and all sorts of information, and then, figuring out, what's still relevant, like year over year comps. How do we take this promo or this campaign launch last year and do it a little bit better? And those types of things, especially in that sort of fashion retail side, I think is very similar to, whether it's omni-channel or just pure brick and mortar retail, where it's really about that comp. What did we do this week, last year? How do we do that a little bit better?
What are you looking for when you do look at the data? There's so many different data points you could look at. Like you said, you've now had experience across multiple companies, multiple teams. Any rules of the road for our listeners who are thinking about the analytics side?
It's trying to get a single source of truth. I think that's the biggest thing, and making sure that data is as reliable as possible. A lot of brands now are on Shopify. Shopify is getting better and better at their analytics. But like when I was at Rothy's, the data that we would get in Shopify, because of returns, because of all these other things, like it wasn't actually useful to tell the story of what we're trying to build, or just how our spend was doing. So one of our first things was getting a BI tool implemented and having a better analytics package so that we could really understand where our spend is going. But at the end of the day, I would say it's about being able to like see where my spend is across channels, see how that's impacting traffic, able to kind of flow that through to conversion. And then ideally you're using some kind of tool for attribution that helps you understand kind of the time to purchase, as well as like first click, last click kind of attribution, just at a high level. And so like, as you get bigger, you can get into really complex media mix models and those types of things. But to me, it's really like, what was my revenue yesterday? What was my sales? What was my new customer mix? And then you start to split out into what are we doing to keep new customers coming in? And what are we doing to keep those existing customers engaged and coming back? I feel like if you don't have the data, you can't, it is really like flying blind, and you just don't know if what you're doing is working or not. So that's kind of my first step everywhere, is like, okay, what's your source of data? How does it look? And then kind of go from there.
Now at Dutch, this is a subscription service. Tell us a little about, we'd all love to have ongoing customers and folks who are coming back, I think, no matter what business we're in. Tell us a little about that. How does it work? What are some of the challenges and opportunities?
Subscription's good and bad. I think it depends on the business. And I've been at a few different, I did digital music subscriptions. I did Hims, I technically is a subscription. And so for Dutch, we're a little bit interesting in that we're kind of part D2C traditional. We have a store, people come and buy, products from us, but the subscription is really that connection with the vet and access. And so for us, we're really trying to sell that access component and get somebody to, have that coverage, be able to talk to a vet whenever they need to. And with that customer that comes in, then it's about getting them into prescriptions, into products they need that will help the care of that pet. So I think the nuance with Dutch that's different from past subscription businesses I've been a part of is it's not a everyday type item. It's not like even the places like Rothy's, it's like, oh, I can probably sell somebody on a pair of shoes at any day because you might be like, oh, all right, I'll check those out. I'll go ahead and get a pair. You don't just randomly have a vet call unless you actually have an issue. So that's probably the biggest challenge from a retention standpoint and from a subscription of I have somebody who might use me this 1 month, this one time, and how do I keep them engaged over, the length of that subscription, whether that's monthly or annual, so that, they come around. Like I want us to be something that is like everybody's like, I use Dutch. Like if you have a pet, you have Dutch, and it just is part of your kind of core pet care. But most of the people that come to us didn't even know that pet telemedicine existed. Like that's probably the biggest challenge is I'm trying to sell somebody on something that they don't even know exists. So you've got to establish trust. You've got to establish a really great customer experience and in a way kind of convince them that this is something that can solve their problem. And then you can get the kind of word of mouth flywheel and that, can really help propel the business.
What are some of those tactics you use? You're kind of building a new brand. Maybe you're not going to go run a Super Bowl ad, let's say, but you are going to run different forms of campaigns and tactics to make sure that you're creating that awareness and that you're present in some of the thinking that these folks are doing.
It's something that's different in every business I've been at, and I think with Dutch and with a lot of businesses where maybe it is a new industry or something that doesn't really exist, it is kind of figuring out like, well, what is the service that providing that is most, similar? How are customers potentially finding that out? And then like, how do we fit into that? So, search is a big kind of component for us because people are searching for medications. They're searching for dog, allergy, anxiety, like things like almost like conditions or issues they're having. And then what we found was like people started searching for like online vet because they had gone like, well, I've seen a therapist online or I've seen my doctor online. I wonder if this exists. So it's a mix of doing customer insight. So actually reaching out, talking to consumers, getting an idea of what their issues are. I mean, we'd go to dog parks. We would go to just talking to friends, family. And then as we started to get traffic, we're running prospect surveys. We're doing one-on-one kind of interviews and going in with a hypothesis, going in with like, okay, here's what we're trying to find out, and then probing on that. And then from that, we can kind of get into like, oh, this channel would actually be really useful for us, or this messaging is actually going to work better. And we're testing. So it's a lot of testing, trying new things, giving stuff a little bit of time, and then rotating, especially when you're small. Like, when we first started, our daily sales were single digit. We were like, yay, we got, we had one person buy, and then, but it is around like I feel like having that pulse on the customer, getting their feedback, understanding how they found you. Like I'm always a big from a kind of attribution perspective of running a post-purchase survey, asking people where they heard about you, marrying that with your internal data to see like, okay, they said they saw me through paid search, but they came in via affiliate. And so kind of goes back to that data sort of foundation, but it's talking to customers. And I think that customer insights is valuable no matter how big you are. You might just have more people to pull from, or a lot maybe more narrow pointed things you're trying to understand. Versus us, it's just sort of like, it started with like, how did you find us? Okay, search. Okay, what did you search for? Why did you think of searching for that? And then that uncovers something that then you can hopefully change, adjust your messaging, those types of things.
Those are some great insights. Any surprises? What have you learned in talking to the customers?
There's always surprises. I think the story around like how did they get to looking for online vet was interesting. I think the other surprise just from it getting into our data is how many of our customers had never seen a vet. Probably half of them, that pet had never been able to get to a vet, either because they couldn't afford it or they just couldn't get in. And I think some of the other surprises are where customers kind of uncover parts or maybe how they use you is different. Like second opinion was something that popped up that I would have never thought. I go to my vet says to do this. All right, that's what the vet says. I don't think about like, oh, I should go check with 2 other vets. So that's been interesting. And then everywhere, like Rothy's, there were some really interesting things that got us into kids' shoes. That one and Rothy's in particular around like the word of mouth component and how we used refer a friend because there was no discounting at the time to really drive virality and sharing. We had women that would go to conferences with like business cards with their little referral code on it to hand out to people. So yeah, I think that, but a lot of those things like we would never have known if we didn't talk to the customer.
Those are great insights. Tell me about some of those other learnings from your time at Rothy's and Hims and Everlane. You've got really interesting history around viral growth, different marketing tactics. What are some of the things that stand out for you?
Channel diversification is always important. Rothy's, for example, was heavy Instagram, Facebook when I got there, and they kind of had tapped out on that. And so, and that's one thing that I've seen at other brands where they're like thinking like, oh, well, everybody's on Instagram or everybody's on Facebook. They are potentially, but they're not necessarily looking at it in a way to interact with you or, I might see ads, but I might be I blank in all of them and I'm just scrolling to the next thing. So that's where like something like paid search and actually, is that the right channel for us? Like at Rothy's, it's like, okay, we had one black flag. We can't compete with Nordstrom and DSW and Bloomingdale's and all these places that have, 50 versions of that product. So, okay, where else can we get in that we can actually break through? I think one of the things more recently that's been interesting is sort of the rise again of direct mail. There's, companies out there like Share Local Media and Poplar and Pebble Post that do more dynamic, almost programmatic, where they can detect a site visitor and then you can send them a code. It works really well for both existing customers and, new customers. That one has been fun because I did direct mail 15, 20 years ago was all catalog stuff. And then all of a sudden it's like fun and new and exciting again.
I remember the Capital One case study from when I was in business school about the envelopes and the messaging. And at the time, of course, it was brand new. So it's neat to hear that is coming back. How do you think about that when one channel maybe stops working for you or has lower attach rate or so on, and you've got to switch channels? Are you just trying out different channels all the time, or are you moving around, or how does that investment happen?
So I think channel like testing is super important, and I kind of look at it as you've got your, typically outside of Dutch, I'm coming into a business that they've already got a bunch of different channels they're using. So there's a little bit of like, okay, are these all effective? Are we using these all in the right way? You can't have every channel just be like, oh, this is how I'm going to drive somebody to my site, or this is how I'm going to get somebody to just convert. There's the whole, upper funnel awareness type like channels. And then there's ones that are more going to get you to like, okay, I'm in consideration mode. Now I'm going to try to get you into that next step. And then there's the ones that like, I came to the site, was looking stuff and I bounced, you might use a channel specifically for that. So I've always tried to have, ideally 20% of my spend is what I would call like test. And I'm trying to find new channels. Those could just be, and really doesn't matter budget size. Like even when I had 50 million, 100 million a year budgets, I still might be like, okay, let's do a 10K, 5K test here. And just to see. That's how, and I do think staying focused. So you're not trying, like when I got to Dutch, they were 3 months in, and they probably were running on at least 10 different channels, if not more. And with a team of one, it's like you can't we can't be effective across all of those. So it was like, okay, search is working really well. Let's keep building out on that. Let's try this one other channel and see if we can get that to work. And if we do, then it folds into our core. And then we look at the next one. That was something that we had done at Provide Commerce Pro Flowers back in the day, where like every year we found another channel. It was like one time it was podcasts, then it was TV, then it was like Facebook came out. And so then there was the group buying, Groupon, living social type stuff. So there was always this new channel. So I'm always trying to keep a pulse on what are the new things that people are trying. And then great, let's throw it in there, give it a test. But making sure you're still staying focused and not spreading yourselves too thin. And like if you think about team structure, you know, you might have somebody that's like, hey, I think direct mail might be an opportunity for us, 4 hours a week, 2 hours a week. And I want you to just like go see what you can do there. That can turn into a whole new role for somebody. That can turn into like now they're a manager because they're able to bring somebody in and like we've proved out the channel, then bring in the help. That's useful. And then there's a lot of marketers to hire, freelance type companies where you can find that expert. I did this with Snap a while back where I knew an agency person that knew how to make Snap work for the audience and it was my type of audience. Great. Go set it up, get it going. And then once it was running, all right, now I'll take it in-house. So I think there's a lot of different approaches to growing that channel mix. And I always try to find, where's the expert? And, can I use them to help get it going? Or, is it something that internally there's a drive or desire and then kind of go from there?
Great advice, great insights. I want to ask you about two other areas. One is content and how you think about that, and what's working. What have you seen work over the days and different roles that you've had, and then the other is about how you go about building these teams. You mentioned one example, but would love to kind of hear how you start from a team of one and then get the whole org in place.
On the content side, I think it's been interesting, even over the last decade, seeing kind of influencers go up and down and kind of back up again. And I think on that, what I found most interesting is utilizing that content, utilizing what they're doing in my own ads on my site in what I'm doing. I'm obviously testing and we're a lot smaller brand, but I think figuring out how it's not just about like, oh, I'm going to get in touch with their audience and their audience is all going to come by with me. You'll get some of that, but I think the real value is, especially for a new brand like us, of that validation, that trust. And, that's one way to break through. One of the things that's been big for us here, I know it was a big thing at HIMS as well, is just around SEO and content. So writing articles, figuring out like HIMS was like, what are guys searching for around hair loss? And can we write articles for that will ultimately get people in, same thing with Dutch around what are things that people are searching for and how can we bring we are, I'd say we are a medical based, company, trying to bring that knowledge to the consumer. And, can we do that from a, site, blog kind of article perspective? And then I think the other thing that's been more interesting is with all of the AI happening, how do we use those tools to make what we're doing more efficient? Whether that's imagery, and now we don't have to go spend, 5-6 figures on a photo shoot all the time, and we can actually do that, or using it to kind of get even just content ideas. There's a lot. I won't go down the whole AI rabbit hole, but there's a lot of good and bad about some of that stuff. And if you don't set things up the right way, it ends up, being, more time consuming. But yeah, I think the on the content side, it's really that is there an SEO play for us? There was the influencer side, because I had a trust, element. I think there's a lot of different ways. And again, you kind of frame it to your business. Some brands, I know it's been more around partnerships and okay, how do we get together, with another brand that has, similar audience and, bring them something. I think the biggest thing with content, it's got to provide value, and that if it doesn't, it's not worth the time. And I think consumers are more and more savvy to, is this actually useful or not? And finding things that are engaging. I mean, our whole like social media play, if you check out our Hello Dutch account on Instagram, it's like fun pet video type things. Like it's really meant to be more of an entertainment channel, and like, then use that content to get people to, eventually be thinking about us.
Some great insights there, I think, around influencers, as a opportunity here, but maybe not so much for their own audience, but for the validation, like you said. And then AI, of course, near and dear to my heart here at It's Rapid. And can we set it up right so you get the kind of the high value outputs from the process, and SEO still super important. So tell us, if you would, about the teams and how do you build them?
It is a little bit of a, there is that prioritization. So if I think at Rothy's, there was one person there that really kind of ran the site. We had some consultants, we had some agencies. I like using agencies or sort of that crutch or that like support to help you get going on something. And then, the Rothy story was really about, okay, I need a good growth, paid media performance person. Doesn't have to be senior. I've always liked or tended to hire individual contributors, but like high functioning, like, a director that just likes to still do stuff. I mean, even me, I'm CMO here. I was acting as CFO and COO when I first started, but it was still like, I'm in Google, optimizing campaigns and running site tests. And I'm, so I look for that type of person who likes solving problems, is, I don't know, people describe it as like, no issues taking the trash out, no job. Like, it's just kind of like, I'm going to do what needs to be done. But I always kind of think through like, okay, you need somebody around growth or who's going to bring you your new customers, somebody around retention, somebody around site optimization, and then that data analytics side. It's almost like if at a larger company, I might have a little growth pod that's like a marketer who's kind of product manager, an analyst, and a designer, and they're all functioning together. Depending on the brand, you'll have digital experience or site merchandising type person as well. But I really started with like, okay, let's get a good person in here that I feel like can grow ideally, into that, VP role and build out that team. So I typically tried to build teams, bring people in and then build teams under them versus like build out a team and then like, okay, I need to go bring in a VP somewhere else. It's not great from morale. I feel like your people are more invested when they feel like, oh, as this grows, I grow. Or even like my channel example where it's like, hey, I could own affiliate if I just build that out and then I can go hire somebody to work for me. And so that's really been that key. And then making sure that those people have the skills for what you need. On the creative side, it's, a really good writer, designer, getting somebody with UX experience and people that work well together and have a little bit more of that growth mindset. I sort of hate that term, but like, it's not about like, oh, I just want to make beautiful images or write great headlines. It's like, no, how does that all work together and actually test, iterate those types? I mean, print background from a creative perspective is always really useful because they know how, I mean, you think about everything online, whether it's an Instagram ad, a direct mail piece, a banner ad, a homepage hero, it's usually a static, all right, I need to get this message across in, half a second and explain something. So that's kind of the other, I think, creative side of it in terms of the teams.
So many great insights, so many great companies that you've been affiliated with, Matt. So thanks for sharing all those with us. I've got a few rapid fire wrap up questions for you. The first of which is, and I know it's hard to pick only two, but which two people have influenced you the most in your professional career?
I'd have to go back to like first, real job it was Music Match. It was a digital music company back in the like early 2000s, late 90s. And Dennis Mudd was the CEO there. And I think for me, it was like seeing somebody who's like building a company around a passion they have, still a problem to solve, but then filling it with people who also share that passion. So like even with what we do at Dutch, it's like where are people that are avid pet fans, even if they don't have a pet, but they're like, oh, I love pet, like that energy helps because you're all kind of behind the same mission. That's one piece, one for sure. And just how do you think through like building a team company? The other one, probably have to cheat and say it was like the leadership team at Provide Commerce Pro Flowers. I don't think there's any one person because like all the areas there was somebody, but it just the basis for data analytics and testing and using consumer insights. And I think that just, I'd probably go back to that company more than anything else in terms of like things that I learned. And, the people across those orgs that I worked with were really, really there.
And we met through Dan at Dacity, speaking of Pro Flowers. So a shout out to Dan, who is now running his company Dacity there. So sounds like you both had a lot of great experiences and learnings at Pro Flowers. So those are great. Second question for you is if when you do get some time outside of work and family, what are your favorite hobbies? What do you like to do?
I probably always go to like cooking the most. I loved it. It's always been something I've done since I was a little kid. And, there's a relaxing component to it. There's a sharing element to it. But I think that's probably the main one. And then obviously the wine and cocktails and all that kind of go around it and being inspired by going out to restaurants. And so, but that probably comes back to like what I, look forward to.
Favorite dish this year?
Lately, I mean, I go through cycles, but I think one of the things lately has been like it's the Nobu miso cod dish, but we've got a ton of cookbooks, and there was a LA based one, and it had the recipe in it. We started making it, and then we just keep doing it. But that's probably one that I like. But we sort of cook every single style you can think of, so it's just more all right, what do we feel like? But I feel like that's one of those like, all right, let's do that again.
Thanks so much. I learned a ton. I learned about marketing, team building, channels, how to add new channels, retention, so many great topics. So thanks for taking the time to speak with me today. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, of course, appreciate it.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. Beyond the Shelf is brought to you by It's Rapid. It's Rapid is the platform Pepsi, Sierra Nevada, Revlon, and hundreds of other leading brands and retailers use to build personalized content at scale. Whether that's images, videos, or product descriptions for their product detail pages, shoppable videos or banners for their digital ad campaigns, or sell sheets for sales enablement, brands that use It's Rapid are able to produce high-quality, on-brand content on average more than 80% faster than category competitors. To find out more, please visit itsrapid.ai. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time on Beyond the Shelf.